So let's start doing that. So this assignment 2 is a title, and I'm going to call that H1 because it's the main title of the page. So markup H1 around that. And then usually what I do is I'm starting to work on these things is, oops, let me undo this. And I'm going to save it as something else here. Here we go. I'm just going to save this as sample HTML. Okay, so let's put that markup back in. So there's my H1 and my closing H1. I'll save this, and then usually what I do is when I'm developing like this, I go into a browser and open up the file from there. Alright, so there we have our HTML page. Let's open it up and we can see how it looks. So right now I only have one tag, and you notice all this other stuff is smashed together. And the reason for that is that in HTML it doesn't care about return characters and new lines and all that stuff. The only thing it'll pay attention to that's not a tag is a single space. Right? So you'll notice there's still spaces between the words. It pays attention to the single spaces, but if you have more than one space, so I'm going to do assignment 2 here, I'm going to put a bunch of spaces in. Let's save that and refresh this page. So we go here and refresh the page. Nothing. Nada. So only one space is all HTML cares about, and the rest you have to do through markup. So going back now to our page, I want to mark up all these things with H2 tags so that they're like, I can see that they're all the same tag, right? Because they're all supposed to be the same. I decided those are all titles that I'm going to use. I'm going to make H2 tags. So I'm going to go here and put my H2 on that. And that there. One thing that you may find on some of these text editing systems is that they give you shortcuts to do things like wrap tags. Under here they have one called wrap selection and open and close tag. And probably these are not too great if you have to like do these drag downs each time, but they often have keyboard shortcuts like this one does here, Control Shift W I believe, and so that will help me do it faster, and I can just type H2. So here again I can select it and type in H2. So this is the other reason people sometimes use text editors, is that once you learn how to use one, it will greatly speed up what you're doing. And here we go. Here's another one. You can just, if you don't have one or you're using, you haven't figured this out yet, just go ahead and type these in. But I'm going to save us a little bit of time in me showing you this demo and doing it this way. H2, and I think this is the last one. H2. So let's save this now and take a look at what the page looks like. So I'm going to refresh it, and now we're starting to look a lot better. Right? We're starting to see, okay, we have all of our nice H2 elements here. Now our text sort of shows up now okay, but it isn't really properly marked up yet because we don't have an actual tag around any of this content. So let's go in and add some tags around those. So on these here, we're going to put those in just regular paragraph tags for all this content. And that's what it defaults to in TextMate here in this particular application when I use this shortcut, but you can also just put these opening and closing paragraphs around it yourself. And there we go. Now this I'm actually going to separate out into 2 paragraphs. And it's important here, I'm going to put now a link around this, right? So let's save this and take a look at it. So it doesn't look any different right now, but I want to make this into a link. And one thing to note is that when you are doing tags that are inline elements, and so let me go back here to our time. So the inline elements here, all of these inline elements have to be inside of a block level element. So the A is the anchor tag. That's what we're going to use for our link, but I can't just put the anchor tag out there in the document. Oops, here we go. So here I need to put it inside of a block level element, which I'm using the paragraph tag for in this case. So we'll wrap this in an anchor element, and that's obviously not enough. Anchor elements require an href attribute to point to where they go to, and I'm just going to copy this out here. Alright, so this is actually a little bit of a long one. I could have maybe chosen some different text. Remember, in an anchor element, the text inside the anchor is what you see on screen, and then this is the actual link that has to be correct. So let's just see how that looks. Oops, I meant to do refresh, not save, and there we go. So now we have a basic page. Now, another thing that might happen is, well, this answer was supposed to be what are the most important requirements of the project, list at least 2. So maybe I wanted to put that as a list, right? Because I sort of hinted at that here. Yeah, you don't have to, but let's say we did. So I'm going to make each of those into a list. So in this case, instead of a paragraph now, I'm going to break this up and pretend that each of these sentences are a separate. So I'm deleting the opening and closing, and I'm going to break each of these into separate ones, each of these sentences. So I'm going to have 4 reasons. So with lists, there's a couple things to remember. One is that you have to choose your type of list, ordered list or unordered list. So in this case, since it's I'm going to number them, I'm going to leave it as an OL, as an ordered list. So that wraps around everything, and then each item, which will be here, what the sentences I broke, get a LI tag. So this one here gets a list item tag, LI, and the same with the other ones here. Oops. By the way, Control Z or Apple Z are a good way to do undo. They work in pretty much every program on the computers. See, there we make a problem, then we just undo it. So that's going to give me now a list. Opening, closing for the whole list, LI around each element, and now I have my list of what's there. And I can use a list again in the other one if I want to. I'm going to do a similar thing here. I'm just going to actually copy this. Getting a little bit lazy here, but that's okay. You want to be lazy in a good way as long as you know what you're doing. I'm going to change this to UL just to remind us that that's the other option. So unordered list here, and save that. And that is going to give you bullet points. Now, let's say you wanted something other than bullet points or 1, 2, 3, 4. You wanted Roman numerals, or you want squares or open circles. All of that stuff is controlled through style sheets. Not what you want to do here. In HTML, you're just sort of saying, this is a title, this is a paragraph, this is a list. So now we have our document. It's marked up with proper HTML. It says what everything is on the page, and it's ready to go. One more thing that I want to add. It's not necessary, but it's used often, and it's something you should know about. Many times, you don't just need to mark up each individual sort of piece of content, but some pieces of content go together, kind of like in sections. So I'm just going to use this here. Let's say this was kind of how I wanted. I wanted to group together for purposes later on, that the name and date were in one section, then I want each question and answer to be its own section, so that maybe in my CSS I can do something like color code these differently in their background color. So I need a few sections around multiple elements here, name and date, and then each question. What we use for that is our div element. Right, so if we go back to our Blackboard, the div one is here first. This is the generic block level element, and you use it to group elements together that are related to each other. So if we go back now to our document, here is the title, and then I wanted to group name and date. So I often will now here give myself a little bit of space so I can see this better later, and I would just simply put a div element around that. And usually when you're doing a div, you want to be able to identify it some way so that you can style it different than other divs. So on this one, I'll give it an ID equals author. All right, and so that I'll leave that lowercase. So that's the information about me, and an ID, we're going to learn that later on, means there's only one of those divs on the page. So an ID, when you're pointing an ID at something, it tells CSS there's only one thing to style on this page. But now my questions are a little different, right? Because they're grouped, but they're all the same basic thing. So I probably would want to style them all the same, or maybe at least close to the same. So on those, I can also put divs around them, right? So I can do div. But here I use a class, and we'll do this later in CSS. I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but I'm saying class equals question answer. All right, and then now we have a class that I can use in my other ones as well. So here's another div here to wrap. Oops, that one got messed up a little bit somehow. There we go. So we have a div, and here again would be another one. There's the question and answer. And I'm just adding these spaces in really for my own benefit. They'll have nothing to do with how it looks. They're just for me. And so I'm going to copy this class from this div to the other div. And in software like Dreamweaver, it's easier to add and subtract these classes as you go along, and we'll look at some of that stuff later. But this is the basic idea. So now what I have is, you'll notice, by the way, these divs, let's go back here, don't do anything to change how the site looks right now. What they do is they group elements together so that later on I can style them up. And that's it. This is a long podcast, I know, on writing HTML, but it was important to sort of go through the entire process of getting a document together. And I could continue to do that for the other divs on the page. Sorry, make divs for the other sections on the page, so that way I would have a page full of nice content that was put together how it was supposed to be as well in terms of related content. So the divs really, for the most part, just put together content that is related to each other, and then use things like classes and IDs to help you identify them and style them later on. So that is, missed a quote there. This is the other good thing about color coding, by the way. If you make a mistake like here, I missed the closing quotes. Everything here started turning green, and that showed me, I did something wrong, and I could look at adding in that other quote.